All right, so for this breakdown, we got a late September hunt. We know it's a muzzleloader hunt. One of our pro staff, Ryan, he's taking his son on a muzzleloader hunt. So just kind of walking in this scenario, you know, deer are already out in the field, so we're kind of entering the hunt midway, and I'll kind of leave it at Chris and see what he thinks and what how he analyzes this scenario.
Yeah, so right away, just knowing time of year and seeing the amount of bucks all hanging out together. Definitely just a bachelor group of bucks, which is typical this time of year. You just see them go out and feeding in the evenings, and then you see this one buck come in here now. And he's definitely bigger than even some of the other nicer looking bucks in there. And the look on his face and just how the other deer are reacting, it's almost like he's got some sort of presence that he brings in there. So I don't know if it's already established that maybe like everybody's like, he's kind of the more mature, the bigger guy in the area. Kind of runs the herd or runs the bachelor group almost.
Yeah, he's definitely way more mature than the other bucks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a little... So this part's where it kind of gets a little bit, brings up some questions for me and just what's going on, just because knowing the time of year, I know they're not quite active yet and getting aggressive with each other, but you can tell he's not too fond of having these other guys nearby. And, you know, being in the younger bucks, they're still just curious and walking around. They think everybody's their friend, even when it's in October.
Yeah,
but yeah, it just kind of brings in some interesting, like, you know, what are they actually doing here? What's going on? I mean, because like I said, you almost can kind of feel it with the herd and how the deer react as soon as he steps out into the field and he joins the rest of them. They all just kind of, he just bring a presence to him, and see, there he goes again. It's just not having it. But it's not like they're competing over does or anything yet. They're still just feeding.
Yeah, how do you kind of walk through this scenario? I'm going to back it up. What are your first thoughts when you see it?
I'm exactly on track with a lot what he's saying there. You can see these two sparring a little bit, you know. This is definitely a bachelor group. Now, I picked up on a doe scenario early on, and so I'm guessing they were all bedded out. They came out to this food source. This is like a patterned event this time of the year. They know each other. They say he and here and that and all this stuff. And they were in great moods early on, but now that they've shed, it's been about 2 weeks or 3 weeks since they shed, and they've been polishing up.
The velvet, yep.
Yeah, from their velvet. That's what I meant, shedding the velvet. And then the big boy gets out here, so I'm just looking at this from a behavior perspective. And so my experiences, and not so much with this age class of a buck, because he's probably, 4.5-ish, is kind of where I'm at with him. He could be 5. But anyway, so in that range, and it's that 6 and 7-year-old where I've seen them do something like this, where they'll come out and make that presence, like what Chris said. He says, like, I'm the guy. I'm coming out and I'm showing you that this is the time of year where I'm the guy. And he's showing that presence in front of does and in front of his buddies. And so he's communicating this, that I am almost like a herd bull. And your bigger, older structure bucks, your 6.5, 7.5, 8.5 deer, they don't have to go chase the does. Okay, they don't have to go look and find a hot doe, because she knows he's the star quarterback and she's the one that he wants. So he can literally make his presence, whether it's through scent, whether it's nocturnal or during the daytime, whatever it is, he knows he's going to get the doe. If he's there, she's in estrus, there's a very high chance that he's going to get the first lockdowns with her, and he's going to lock down with her, and she's going to tolerate him being with him all the time. So he's basically given that, okay, I'm the big guy. And as you watch him go through this process of these bucks that are used to interacting with him, it almost looks to me like he's pushing them off and creating, imagine those does were back here behind him originally, and now he's just kind of herding them. He's basically herding them off and letting them know, don't come between me and the does, because that's my deal. And I've literally watched, and we have footage of this, we'll be share it sometime. They'll sit out there and they'll do that long breeding grunt, that croaker grunt that Rod White talked about, that you filmed for the first time. And I saw that big, huge buck. We filmed it with that little Panasonic 4x3, and we were still first learning. And I look back on that experience and I see that big buck went out in the middle of an open field, late September, early October, and there was deer everywhere. The does were just doing what they normally do. They could have cared less about the bucks being there. But the little bucks were buzzing around, okay? And he sat out there and he just did this long, and we didn't have the audio of it, but I'm looking at him going, what is that deer doing? He had his mouth open, he pushed that neck forward almost like a bugling bull. And so that sticks into my brain, and I think that's what's happening here. We're setting pecking order for the very beginning of the season. That's kind of my thought process, because he doesn't want them over there. And maybe I can't see everything around there, but I'm just thinking for some reason that he's trying to separate them from the does, letting them know we're not having fun no more. I'm in charge, and if you don't respect me, you're going to get me mad. And he's agitated.
Yeah, that's all really good. I'll walk back and kind of give my thoughts on the whole start of the scenario. Later in the evening, sunset, a little bit of light still hitting the leaves, but not real harsh. I'm thinking, knowing Ryan and how much he scouts and how strict his management practices are, I'm sure he's been on these deer all through velvet, all through summer. This is kind of looks like probably a transition food plot into a bigger egg field later at night. So he's probably been watching him hit this green field. It looks like some type of, I would guess, knowing that he works with Andy, AWS, fall performance. Turnips and oats, and pretty good, like a really good mix for this time of the year. All the other grasses in the back are drying up, but these nice green lush food plots can be great. September, October, all the bucks are still in their bachelor group. This buck comes out a little bit later than the rest, which is typical. Probably coming from his bedding off in the background. And as he enters, I think he just doesn't want to take any crap from these little bucks, and I think they're just not really experienced, especially these ones that approach him, and they think that they're still buddies and they can lick each other and groom each other and be friends and eat next to each other. But he's getting to the point where he's pretty aggressive. His neck's swelling up, testosterone levels are starting to get on the rise. He's putting on weight, and he's a nice buck. Ears pinned way back, tail tucked way down, and he did bristle a little bit too. Yeah, and I put him at 6 is what I think his age would be, and I could go down to 5 or up to, I think he's 6. Yeah, you get a good look at him here. Look at that big belly now. Big head, belly, big body. He could, go a year or two on either side of 6, but that rack and that mass, I don't think a 4-year-old puts that on. I've never seen that unless he's just super freak genetic wise, but yeah, definitely a distinct gut. Real big, and I think he's just A to B, bedding, transition into food, and then destination plot later at night. So I think he's just more of on an A to B pattern, coming out late, and all these other bucks are basically just roadblocks in his way, and if they get close, he bristles up and pushes them away and lets them know that he's the most dominant buck in the area. There's some 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds and 1-year-olds out. Yeah, now that you said the age there, now I'm actually looking at that, and you can see a good look at the belly, and I wasn't paying much attention to it, but then you look at the ear ratio with the thickness of the frame and how big the ears are compared to the total frame, and I definitely see a much nicer deer.
Does the face or head play into the aging? Because he's like, is it just me, or does he look almost like a mule deer kind of?
Yeah, he looks like I look at it like a bull, like a little heifer, where he just gets that big blocky face, and it's real dark. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, facial features, like the deer on the right, like I've said on one of the other breakdowns, if you take the rack off, it looks like a doe, just a small, slender head, slender neck. I mean, that deer's, the big one here is twice the size of that other one, so he's
Yeah, look at
When
that.
they start to stand next to each other, you can really tell.
Look at the beams too.
And Ryan's kind of guiding his son on this hunt. I'm waiting for a nice position where he can get a good shot on him, and you know, they can kind of sync up on camera and in the scope or in the sights, whatever the scenario is with this muzzleloader. And you know, it's just really, really great footage. I think a lot of scouting went into it. I don't think they just went out there and all these bucks appeared. I'm pretty sure Ryan had a lot of intel on this hunt setup, and I mean, I'm sure they had a lot of action before the camera even rolls into this clip. The sun's still right on the horizon there, so I'm sure these bucks have been out there for a half hour hanging out. I'm sure there were does out there, and it was a great hunt. And we're gonna break this one down at some point in the studio and really, you know, put all the recreates and post-hunt stuff into that one.
Get his perspective on what actually did unfold.
Get his perspective. And another cool, I mean, he's sitting in a big oak tree, so maybe there's some acorns here too. He's just in a really good spot for that afternoon movement. Probably slid in with the wind blowing away from these deer. Back into the timber behind him. That'd be interesting to see what he said as far as his approach heading into the stand. You know, what he planted. There's some type of L shape here. I'm sure he thought that through with some type of movement pattern with the deer. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff here. And a really nice buck.
Yeah, I want to bring something up on aging too, because I'm not that great at it. And you know, we'll get better, but he's got a good perspective on this deer because he's got the inventories and the pictures, and he knows the name of the deer, and you do that all the time. So once we start to identify the physical characteristics of the rack and the deer itself, and we put names on them, then you know exactly how old those deer are. Where if you're just looking at something where this is the first time you ever seen a deer and you're just, you know, coming at it from a non-informational perspective, you know, you really, really gotta, there's a lot of room for error, I think. You know, but we kind of know our deer, you know, from a genetic perspective, because we watch them all the way from velvet on up, you know, and from year to year. How many years did we watch Curly before we finally took him down?
Yeah, and every deer is different, so it's hard to really gauge. You know, some deer are tall and thin, other deer are fat and heavy.
Right, but when he was standing next to that fawn, it was like, holy cow, look at the size of that animal, where you don't see it there so much, you know what I mean?
And the mass too is deceiving. I mean, that thing has a lot of mass. If I had to, I don't know what the deer scored. I don't know how old he was.
We'll find out.
Guess, and I would say it's a mid to upper 60s for a score. And like I said, I think 6-year-old. Big 10-pointer, a lot of tine length, a lot of mass. Really good deer. Yeah, so we'll have to see what happened, or what the result is, what Ryan knew about this hunt and this deer. That'd be kind of cool. But either way, he's dead. And he's a trophy.
Great buck.
We won't show the kill shot just yet. Any other thoughts, Chris, from you, looking at this clip here?
No, I usually don't get out too much early season, so it's kind of new.
Well, this is typical for JJ. He got lots of, look at the size of that little deer compared to him. I mean, it looks like a, it's tiny. It does. It looks like a little puppy. That's crazy. That really puts perspective on it. And is that a doe or a
Yeah, it's a doe.
Yeah, I mean, look at the perspective there. He's in the, you know, the background. She's in the foreground. That really puts a lot of perspective on it, especially when you look at that belly and that mass. Now you can get a really, really good look at that.
Yeah, to kind of wrap this up, thinking about, you know, lessons learned or just kind of thoughts in general. You know, you always hear the biggest, most mature bucks every year are taken early season and late season, and that's based on, you know, these bucks are on a pattern, they're predictable, and they daylight. So this is a perfect scenario that just showcases that. Middle of the rut, they're just so unpredictable and more cautious, hunter pressure. Difficult to shoot a really, really big buck during the rut, but early season, late season, they make some mistakes and they kind of let their guard down. And perfect scenario here to take advantage of that. And as you can see, he's out in the daylight. And
yeah, and on that note, hunting pressure, you do really good on patterning the deer early, and getting the deer patterned early can be very successful and has been for you. And the key to that is don't go in there. Stay the heck out of there. Let it just unfold. Let it just happen and just document it. Once you get it documented and they have no idea and you haven't put any human presence there and you got it figured out and you're all set up, that's when you go in and that's when you're going to have your success.
And your scenario, your weather and everything lines up.
Yeah, everything. You line up, I line up all the things, from the, the pressures to the moon to everything, wind, the whole thing. And so there's that. And then from a communication perspective, everything, some of the hunts that we've had really early on, we went to North Dakota and did a velvet hunt, and we were successful with it. And the first thing I thought about, I says, this isn't going to do us any good because we're not going to get any communication. We're not going to be able to promote calling or anything like that. But it didn't matter because I wanted to get a velvet buck. So we get out there, and it was the exact opposite. I never heard the does and the fawns communicating so much. There was so much talking going on. It just blew my mind. I'm like, well, holy cow. Now how does that work, to bring in a buck? You're not going to call them in a traditional sense, but this is the perfect scenario, okay? Sound like a herd because they're talking like crazy. It's fawns, it's does, they're there. Or the first buck's coming in that he doesn't really want to show any kind of dominance in his area, even though he might have separated himself. And this is the perfect time for that because he did separate himself. And now he's coming into the transition late in the day, and you've even done it successfully many times. You see him drifting off, and you just do like a light little rattle, you know what I mean, behind your back to a room that you knew he wanted to go to and check out if there was deer there. And it worked to a T, and he walked right into your shooting lane. So that's the kind of thing, you can absolutely call, but you have to use a different strategy. Sound like the herd. Don't try and call directly to him to say, hey, come on over here. Don't challenge him. Don't pretend like you're a hot doe. It doesn't make any sense. In this case, early season, sound like a herd because he's going into, have him show his dominance. And that works for you. So don't be aggressive, I guess. You can be boisterous, but not aggressive.